Hey, what's up guys? John here. Biden's climate action plan is going to greatly impact not just the real estate market, but all markets. And it's going to decimate the economy. Right now I'm in a hotel. I've been in hotels, living in hotels the last 3 weeks, looking for a property to either buy or lease in Delray Beach, Florida, or in the surrounding communities. And in this specific pocket, homes have appreciated 22% in the last 12 months. There's no inventory. The moment something comes on the market, it flies off the shelf above asking, and people are paying all cash. And people are just, I think, emotion is driving these purchases. People just want freedom. They want to get out of their former cities and states. And with that being said, I think that this action plan is going to greatly impact all industries in America. And I'm going to cover that in this video, where I see things going, as well as the cost to the everyday consumer and where the economy is likely headed. With that being said, please smash that like button. When you hit the like button, YouTube's going to share the content and more people will be educated as to what's really happening. We're not going back to normal as we once knew it. We're going into this new normal, and this new normal is going to really bring people back to reality in terms of affordability and what people can actually afford to pay for properties and what people should actually be doing with their money right now. So please hit that like button and let's begin. This article here, Wall Street Journal, it's interesting, and I think it's something that we need to pay very careful attention to, because the main argument behind this climate agenda is that, oh no, Biden would never do, or the government would never do this to us. They would never put us in a position to where people are going to face financial hardships. We're going to see millions and millions of jobs lost. We're going to see big brother dependency at a level that we've never seen. Capitalism essentially being really challenged over the coming couple of years. And people, I think, we've been spoiled for many years in America, thinking that things will never get to a place of real despair and desperation. But when I read this and see what they're doing, it makes me question that. It says, was President Biden trying to impress China's Jinping at Thursday's climate prep rally? This article was last week. By committing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by half below 2005 levels by 2030, his pledge tees up sweeping new government controls over the economy of the kind you might expect to see in one of Mr. Jinping's 5-year plan. In China, Mr. Biden now has a 10-year vision for central economic planning. Mr. Biden's virtual world tour summit was intended to coax China and other emerging countries to make more aggressive emission reductions. The U.S. accounts for less than 15% of global CO2 emissions. Mr. Biden told world leaders emissions in the U.S. and Europe have been falling since 2005, and natural gas and renewables have replaced coal power. We have roughly 1.9 million jobs just with coal and gas, fossil fuels in America. 1.9 million. That number is going to start fading dramatically. Moments after Biden forced this proposal forward, West Virginia Attorney General came out and said that everyone in America will feel the weight of this proposal, but rapidly ditching fossil fuels in order to meet Biden's radical goal would disproportionately hurt places like West Virginia, Wyoming, Kentucky, Montana, Ohio, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Alaska. I could list many other states, he continued. The human impact of increased prices and massive job losses would be a tragedy. So naturally, Biden promises that his plan will create enough jobs to more than make up for the jobs his proposal sets to eliminate. But the real impact of Biden's plan can't be measured in jobs it will destroy. You have to consider jobs it will suffocate. But rising emissions from China have swamped these declines. At the Paris Climate Agreement Summit in 2015, China committed only to begin reducing emissions in 2030. It has continued to build coal plants and expand industrial production. China's CO2 emissions increased by more between 2015 and 2018 than the UK's total emissions in 2018. All of the CO2 commitments made in the Paris, including Barack Obama's plan to reduce US emissions by 26% to 28%, will reduce the Earth's temperature by a mere 0.017 degrees Celsius by 2100. Not even close to the 1.5 degrees that is supposedly needed to heat off doomsday. Yet Mr. Biden now wants us to double down on Mr. Obama's futile climate gesture. What would the U.S. have to do to achieve Mr. Biden's new emissions pledge? Start with some perspective. The Obama regulatory fusillade got the U.S. only about halfway to his Paris pledge, and most of his reductions during his presidency were from natural gas displacing coal and power due to market forces. Amid last year's lockdowns, greenhouse gas fell about 21%, below 2005 levels. So in order for us to get to this point, even with the economy shut down and a large share of the population stuck at home, the U.S. was less than halfway to Biden's goal. So with the whole economy shut down, everyone staying indoors in nearly every state, we were halfway there. So we would have to realize the amount of change that would have to come for us to hit this type of mark. Some green groups have done their own back-of-the-envelope analysis on what it would take to achieve Mr. Biden's 10-year plan. Take a recent Environmental Defense Fund, EDF, report that argues for a strong whole-of-government approach. This includes eliminating new gas-powered cars by 2035, presumably by ramping up corporate average fuel economy, CAF, standards. Mr. Biden has also proposed sweetening federal tax credits for buying electric cars, currently at $7,500. But soon consumers will have no choice but to buy them when their gas vehicles expire. The Biden goal will require the electric grid to be totally rebuilt in 10 years for electric vehicles. I bought my wife a 2020 Tesla last year. She really wanted the car and I got it for her. And I'm gonna be completely honest with you, the car, it's a pain. If you're gonna drive that vehicle a long distance, you have to stop at a supercharger and you're gonna spend an hour just sitting in your car. And then ultimately at the end, the fees to charge that car probably be about $18 or $20. Whereas if you went to a gas station and you just filled the tank, you'd be in and out of there in 2 to 3 minutes and the cost would be maybe $30 or $35. So depending on how much you value time and how often you drive, it doesn't really make too much sense. Right now in Florida, we're renting a car. It's a gas vehicle and it's bringing a whole new level of appreciation to gas vehicles. Me being able to drive, stop, fill up the tank, and go on with my life is so much more refreshing. It's just a better experience. And when this continues to head in this direction with gas vehicles being pushed out of existence and electric vehicles continuing to grow in popularity by force, ultimately what happens is mechanics and small shops close down permanently because people are going to be going to the dealerships. They're going to get service there. And then ultimately the dealerships are going to be able to price fix. And ultimately it's going to fall back on the end of the consumer. And not many people are going to be able to afford to take their car to the dealer to get fixed. Unlike Jinping in China, U.S. President Biden doesn't have the legal authority to decree sweeping emission reductions across the economy, but liberals argue that Sections 115 of the Clean Air Act, titled International Air Pollution, allows the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate emissions that may reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health or welfare in a foreign country. The catch is the EPA can do so if there is a regulatory reciprocity among other nations. Mr. Biden is essentially doing an end run around the Constitution, which requires approval by 2/3 of the Senate for the president to enter a treaty. The emission reductions that foreign leaders pledged on Thursday aren't legally binding, but Mr. Biden intends to use regulation to bind Americans. All coal plants will have to be shut down, and natural gas plants will have to be phased into obsolescence. Wind and solar energy would have to increase 6 to 7 times, and the Obama Clean Power Plan, which the Supreme Court blocked in 2016, looks modest by comparison. It sought to reduce CO2 power emissions by 32%. Most homes would have to be electrified. So the cost to electrify a home, it's not $5,000 or $6,000 like a typical retrofit. No. To retrofit your property and electrify it, it's $70,000 to electrify and decarbonize your property. It's a pretty big number, especially when you factor in taxes are going to be going up. People just simply can't afford to write a check for 70 grand. And that's the average home. So the median income in America, it's kind of like a teacher's salary. That's 1 year's worth of wages just to electrify your single property. not including buying a new electric vehicle, not including all these new regulations that are going to be coming. So if you like your gas stove, too bad, that gas stove is done, as everything's going to essentially change to clean energy for your house to decarbonize it for the world and for the environment. Ultimately, farmers would have to adopt a climate smart agriculture and forestry, EDF says. So what is that? Well, it's a targeted approach or strategy to increase the climate benefits from forest and the forest sector in a way to create synergies with other needs related to forest. The approach builds on 3 pillars: reducing and removing greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating climate change. So ultimately, what I hear is more regulation and more change and a harder time for farmers to make a living. And ultimately, that's kind of what they were pushing for initially. So we're going to see big time regulation on not just cars, on gas and coal. We're going to see it in real estate. We're going to see it across the board with food production. And it's going to be really interesting. The next couple of years are going to be really interesting. We're in a very transitional period in the world right now. We have a lot of people investing their money for good reason into real estate right now because they want to own hard assets. But the key right now is also going to be taking into consideration the direction that the world's going and not being too lopsided on your investing portfolio, just being all real estate in one specific market, or being all green stocks or all crypto, because things can change very quickly. And if it does, you want to make sure you're going to be able to pivot and move accordingly and make smart investments going forward. So I really enjoy studying and learning this because me as an investor, if this happens and they are trying to essentially force people to electrify their homes, that's going to greatly impact the real estate market. I mean, there's no way you get out of that. They start fining people for not retrofitting their homes or turning off their power like we've seen people do during these shutdowns. We've seen people lose power to their businesses for not complying with their requests with closing and meeting health requirements. Could this happen with real estate? I'm not saying it will, but could it? Yeah, it could. I mean, what are your thoughts on all this? Drop your comments below. Really curious as to how you guys see this climate plan. It seems like the approval ratings are really high on Facebook and social media, but I don't really believe any of those things. So drop your comments below and I'll respond to you guys. Please smash the like button. Consider subscribing for more content on personal finance, real estate, business, and money. And I'll see you guys in the next video. If you'd like to learn how to get started on YouTube, click the link in my bio. It's a free live training. And if you'd like to learn how to invest in cash flowing multifamily real estate for beginners, there's a link there as well. All right, guys.